Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Fight the Funk podcast dedicated to mental health, exploring culture and the world around us. My name is Magic Collins. I am the host, and it is Mental Health Awareness Month. And as a mental health advocate, I want to give a shout out to the organizations I work with, NAMI West LA, Black Mental Health Task Force, Be Well Collaborative. And today I got a special guest, Jonathan. And Jonathan is a clinician, and he's a music educator and a founder. And I'm happy to have him and joining us today. Hey, Jonathan, how you doing, man?
Hey, Magic. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to
Yeah,
be.
yeah, man. Welcome, welcome. Like I've been chatting with you on and off throughout the pandemic, man. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
yeah, yeah. You've been kind of keeping tabs and on my mental health, man. I appreciate that.
It's cool, man. And it's like you said, it is interesting that through this pandemic, there's been
Mm.
like connections made, and like you said, it's kind of cool having people that you've tracked through the pandemic with. So you're definitely one of those people. So it's been cool.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Now how did the pandemic kind of affect you and your work, man? Cause you work out in San Gabriel?
Yeah, so I'm in the San Gabriel Valley, and you know, it's a pretty populous area, if you will, or
Mm.
populated area. It's
Mm.
in LA County, so we do get a lot of families through our program.
Uh,
Um, so yeah, San Gabriel Valley, that's where I've been at for the last few years.
okay. Okay. And I gotta say, I like the plants in the background.
Self-care, man. It's kind of
Yeah.
funny. That's like one of those things that happened because of the pandemic.
Uh,
Um, so you're asking about work. Uh, the biggest thing I think I noticed like right away for the pandemic was so I've been doing clinical social work, trying to get licensed. Hopefully that happens this year. But I also teach music, and so that was always like the kind of way I balanced out my day. I would work with
yeah.
the trauma population during the working hours, and then after work, go teach like a marching band rehearsal, basically.
Uh,
So really that's what I felt the most was when the pandemic, when the lockdowns happened, they shut down all the extracurricular activities. So marching band was one of them. And it took me a long time to adjust to that. I was so used to knowing I always had that to look forward to, like outside of my clinical work. So when I was, you know, kind of left with clinical work and you go home, it was like, what do I do with all this time that I'm used to spending with students? And my wife is the same way. So my wife also has her MSW, but she was teaching music full time. And so both of us were kind of just not used to having time on our hands, basically. And so one of the ways we started to fill up some of that time was getting plants. And we just happen to live, it's about a 5-minute drive from a really, really, really nice nursery where they have amazing plants. So that's something that we actually started doing just to kind of stay grounded throughout the pandemic. Was we became a plant family, if you
yeah.
will. We have
You yeah, you want to give a shout out to the nursery?
yeah. I would tell anyone, if you're in the LA area,
Mm.
I would say it's worth the drive. It's called Plant Safari, and
Uh,
they're in Oakland, California, and they just have really quality plants. We've been
mm.
to a lot, now that we're into plants, and they just have really good quality plants, man. That's the best way I could
Yeah.
describe it. Like everything they have to offer,
Uh,
take really, really good care, and they have a lot of
mm.
variety. So we've learned a bunch, but that's been like another one of those blessings in this
Yeah.
pandemic.
Yeah. Nice, man. Nice. Now, what so we both have a love for trees, man. I know for myself, like I love the sequoia trees and just like how majestic they are. Now, what's your favorite tree?
It's kind of weird. I guess if I had to have a favorite,
Uh,
it's one that was pointed out to me like as a young kid is like the weeping willow.
uh,
Um, and some of it, I think I do resonate a little bit, like just my
uh,
personality, kind of more on the low key side. So I've always
yeah.
liked that kind of, they just go with the flow, you know.
Uh,
Um, I never really liked the weeping part,
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's sadness, but that's a tree that I just grew up kind of, my mom, it's one of her favorites. So she would always,
Uh,
look at that weeping willow over there. I've always liked those, but just in general, man, like trees, they're such giant structures for
Mhm.
one. I think that's what always every day catches my eye, like at
Mhm.
least twice a day. It's just like how big they are.
Yeah.
But their role in our environment is so important. So there's
Mhm.
just a lot of appreciation I have for trees. I think they can teach us a lot. Just
Yeah.
about even plants. I was thinking about that this morning. Watering some
Uh,
of the, you learn so much from
mm,
spending time with nature, and a lot of
mm,
those totally transfer into like our life, right? So
mm.
trees are definitely in that category to me. Like as far as like longevity and just looking at the lifetime of a tree, I think it's a really
Yeah.
good metaphor, if you will, of life in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Like that's kind of what I like to think. Like when as I learn more and try to have a better meditation practice, it's kind of like the tree is, it's like it just is. Like it's not trying to be anything. It just is. And I think that's kind of helped like the meditation practice, where it's like I try to think of the tree as I'm meditating, and it's like to be in your talent, to be in your gifts. It's not a force to, it's like it just is. Like I am who I am. I am here.
Yeah,
And that's kind of what I've been working on with like meditating in front of trees. And I know it sounds hokey. It's like it is something where it's like just being around trees, man, does that um, kind of grounding for you.
well, yeah, it's like you could think about it the opposite way. I don't think it would
Mm-hmm.
be more healthy for us to distance ourselves from nature. I think if anything, like we are supposed to be kind of one with the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, it sounds a little hokey or a little hippie-ish, but it's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, really though, why wouldn't we? Like I
Yeah.
think we both work both ways. Nature needs us and we need nature. So I think it's
Mm-hmm.
always a good thing when people press into that. And
Mm-hmm.
like I said, me and my wife are super happy with just like what they bring to our space now. Like when we have our watering days, because we have like over 50 now. And so
Dang.
yeah, bro, like it's crazy. Like we don't even know how or when it happened, but it's like we have a lot of plants. And so our watering days, it
Uh,
does take a lot of time, and we have to kind of clear out. We have a few different zones where we have like the plants around, so like we'll have to clear those out, and
uh,
it always looks so empty now. When it's like, dang, that's what they added to the space was just like, So I think it's a good thing, man. I think more people would benefit, if they found some peace in nature to connect to
yeah.
plants, trees, even animals. I think you just learn a lot. You learn a lot, and you really start to see how we're like interconnected. Like we really are.
Hold on. I'm starting to break up. Did you
Am I
hear
good?
me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think we starting to lose the signal a little bit.
Okay.
Now, with your work at like social work, how did that kind of inform you throughout the pandemic? And even now, man, it was like with so much social unrest, and you provide service with people with traumatic experiences. How did that inform you and kind of allow you to move through this pandemic with what you know about human behavior?
Yeah. So I mean, I do the mental health services for our agency.
Mm,
So we're kind of always looking at, or at least when you're trained as a social worker, like we really are trying to see how the environmental factors,
mm,
are going to impact the client. And so it was one of those things when the beginning started with the lockdowns,
mm,
because I work in a domestic violence shelter. So we
mm,
already had the shelter was full of families when they started locking things down. So that was
mm,
kind of the first, um, I guess you could say, like insight into the pandemic was the families in our shelter weren't allowed to go out anymore because they were also on lockdown. So just seeing how that impacted them, because they're in our shelter seeking independence, like they're trying to get back into their own living space. And so to tell a person in that state that, hey, you can't leave and you can't go out and continue to build your life was really difficult to see because again, they're in our program because they're trying to get back to living a more, typical life in their own living space. And so a lot of the clients struggled with that at the beginning, like the whole you only get a limited amount of time outside of the shelter. And that came like down the road, but early on, that was kind of the biggest impact I saw was people having to stay inside it was a struggle, especially when you think about like self-care. A 5 minute walk around the block for some people is enough to like ground themselves. And so to have to tell someone, hey, I know you're used to doing that, but you can't do that right now because of the pandemic. It was a struggle to try to find just like good options for healthy coping. Because for a lot of people, it is getting outside and just like I said, getting out of the room that you're in or the space that you're in. So that was a little difficult, trying to be like understanding and empathic of like what they're going through, but then at the same time, like knowing on the agency side, the Department of Mental Health, or sorry, Department of Public Health has all these protocols in place that they're also trying to figure out. So it was a little difficult because if you can remember back, a lot of the stuff was flip flopping, man. Like one week it would be this, the next week it would be that. So we were having to translate all that to clients and families.
Yeah.
And that was difficult.
Yeah.
It definitely changed a lot of my session work because it turned into processing that, which was fine.
Uh-huh.
It made sense. It kind of turned into the presenting challenge for a lot of people was like the pandemic, So I think that's how I saw that just really impacts like at least the population that we work with.
Yeah, and that's what I think the uneven ground of you got a federal level that doesn't have a plan, and then it trickled down to the state level, and then that dissension as far as like even within the state, you have different governors in different cities that now are emboldened to do their own thing, and it just became a mess of decision making. And it's like that made things so much more difficult because of that. So much of that kind of leadership just kind of trickled down. Now, how did that kind of affect you guys? That had to be challenging, man. It's like because if you have so much different perspectives, and it's like there's not really one voice. It's like, how did that kind of help? Like, how did you kind of navigate through that week in, week out?
So something our agency has kind of always done is since we're in LA County, we basically default to whatever the county is doing.
Okay.
So that's kind of how our CEO approached it. Shout out to Deborah Ward, she's awesome. But that's how she approached it. She was just like, whatever the county says, that's what we're gonna follow as far as guidelines. So, like you said, especially just getting families from different regions where it's like, oh well, this region is saying that, or this county is saying that. It was kind of like, that's we understand, but we're gonna have to do what LA County is basically recommending right now. So we did get a lot of help, I would say, from, like I said, the Department of Public Health. I thought they made themselves pretty accessible when we would have questions about like certain situations that popped up. So there was a lot of guidance, and I would say that's kind of where it came from, like the county in general, but then definitely through the department, they were always able to kind of give us the information we needed.
Yeah. Okay. And then like with your work as far as like music, since that when the pandemic shut down, you weren't able to do what you normally do with music and cultivating, young musicians. How did you start adjusting to that?
That was, and it's still hard, man.
Yeah.
Because they didn't completely shut things down. They pushed everyone virtual. And it's not to say that you still can't have a fulfilling experience virtually, but a lot of the students, man, they were also trying to manage, all these different emotions and having things taken away, like their graduation and their proms. So it was like, I don't know, I started to get the sense that, let's just say, marching band used to be like a number one priority for a student. It kind of slid way down their list because they also had all these things that they're trying to kind of make sense of. So a lot of students started to quit. And interestingly, it was a lot of the older students, like the seniors and the juniors, because we primarily teach like high school students, so it was really hard to kind of see that happen because obviously you're sad for them. They're losing out on these like experiences through your youth that I'm sure we all can remember. Like those high school kind of age memories are pretty special. So it was easy to like not blame them for wanting to walk away from Drumline, but it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
really difficult to accept that, some of our programs you have been building for like 5 or 6 years, and then the
Mhm.
kind of cut all that away.
Dang.
Other programs, yeah, exactly. Like other programs that had been building for like 10 years, 15 years, they were able to still have enough culture in the students where they understood everything we've built is going to be worth pushing through this virtual season. So let's stay committed and let's get back to it when we can. But I did
Mhm.
see with like the younger programs or with like younger students, they just couldn't really understand the value of everything
Yeah.
that built, up until the pandemic. So it was a little easier for them to walk away.
Mhm.
I feel like that's kind of what happened is we changed kind of the approach to teaching. Instead of
Mhm.
being so like hard up and like so strict, you have to be understanding, because these
Yeah.
kids are going through it, and if they feel like Drumline's not helping them right now, like it is what it is. So
Mhm.
that's kind of how I started to approach it. I was just trying to decrease stress as much as I could, man. Like if
Mhm.
quitting is gonna make you feel better, then by all means do what you got to do. But
Yeah,
some of them,
yeah.
they have stuck it out, and I applaud them. Like they're still doing the virtual sessions, and
Mhm.
just about 2 weeks ago, I would say a lot of groups in our region started getting back to in person. But
Mhm.
we have friends all over the world, and especially throughout our country, they got back
Mhm.
into face-to-face stuff a while ago.
Okay.
So it kind of like goes back to like those regional differences. It's kind of crazy
Mhm.
to see just how everyone handled it because like a lot of our friends in Texas, where marching band is like huge,
Mhm.
yeah, they got back into the face-to-face stuff a while ago. Obviously with like protocols in place, but
Yeah,
for
yeah.
us in California, it's just been trying to keep the students motivated until we can kind of get back to the
Mhm.
normal like face-to-face. But it's been a struggle for sure.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And now, do you feel like there's been how do you feel about like progress? And I know you work, with your job, but how do you feel about the progress that we're at right now in California?
I could definitely say I felt the shift since the
Mm,
vaccines became available.
mm,
Um, so a lot of times, like we'll talk about physical safety, but then like
mm,
psychological safety, emotional safety.
mm.
Um, I feel like the vaccine really helps with the psychological safety, and I've
Yeah,
seen that
yeah.
kind of across the boards. Like whether you're an adult or like a teenager, like an adolescent that got vaccinated. Um,
Mm,
yeah, a lot of people like that was enough for them to feel safe to kind of get back out and get out of their home. So I think
mm,
it's great. I myself am not vaccinated,
mm.
and that was like a decision. Obviously, everyone has to make. Um, but I could say, just speaking to those that are vaccinated, I think it has definitely helped. Like I said, with their psychological safety, and and the hopes also with their physical safety. That's kind of the whole point of
Mm.
the vaccine is to try to make it so that person is exposed, the impact isn't as great. So I think that's been the
Mm.
biggest change. Is once that happened, that's when I started hearing about more high school programs or campuses kind of opening back up, people going back to work, things like that. So I think the vaccine has definitely helped push us forward.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. And now with that, we're gonna take a commercial break because I gotta plug this laptop in. So give me give me a second.
All right, cool.
All right. All right. We are back. We are back.
All right, cool.
Talking with Jonathan. All right. So this is the inside version of the podcast.
Cool.
Yeah, part two of the Fight the Funk podcast with Jonathan. um, Now you're talking about the pandemic, and then and you're pleased with like the progress that's been made. Now, as far as last year, social unrest, social. Well, one thing I like to say is social outrage because I think that's more of what it is. And that's something that I heard on like another podcast where I was like, that's pretty much it's more of a reaction to what you see of the continuing injustice that we've experienced our whole life. So it's more of an outrage than just social unrest. Now, how has that kind of informed and kind of changed your life in a way moving forward?
So yeah, it's like you said. I think being born into the flesh we're in, melanated individuals, it's something you do kind of understand growing up, and it's not for everyone. There's plenty of people out there that look like you and I that say like, I've never seen racism, like it doesn't exist. That's out there. But for a lot of other people, like we've seen things, we've been through things, we've experienced things. And I think that's the hard part with racism is it's always hard to prove that definitively it had to do with race. And I think that's one of the things that make it really difficult for people to understand, because you can find so many other reasons why that particular incident went that way. Like you said, growing up, kind of knowing that it's difficult. And a lot of the insight I have right now, Magic, comes from working with the DV population, because it's very similar where it's like, unless there's physical abuse, it's really difficult sometimes for people to understand that there's domestic violence happening. So you get into like the financial abuse, or you get into the psychological abuse or the verbal abuse, which are all things that racism also has. But again, it's hard to prove that stuff out when people are like, oh, well, maybe you just heard it that way, or maybe it wasn't what you really thought. And it's like, no, like I'm almost certain, I can't prove it, but we all have these
intuition, like a feeling.
Like we have our logic, which is our mind, but we have our emotions, which is our heart, but we also have our gut, which picks up on things. You could be walking down the street and sense that someone's following you, and you turn around and there's a person. I don't know what that is, but we have that, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like with racism, that's kind of been my experience growing up, where it's like that seemed to be motivated by race, but it's hard to prove, right? So right now, just what I've seen through the pandemic and going through 2020 and last summer, is we seem to have hit a tipping point. And the reason I say we've hit a tipping point is you can see things that we've never seen before. As far as, like people being publicly outed for doing something racist, people being fired for doing something racist, people being arrested, jailed, and with Chauvin convicted. So it's like we have hit some point where I think more people are aware that we need to actually start taking these things into action instead of just talking about it. So I actually like where things are going, because I'm seeing things that we've never seen before. I feel like every day I read at least one article about someone that's getting caught up because they said something racist. I think yesterday it was like a fire chief that said like, stop responding to black neighborhoods, they'll just kill themselves. And it's just like, when they interview him, of course he apologized and he's like, well, that's not what I meant. Like, I just don't like the narrative of like police always ending life. So it's like, I understand what he's saying, but it's like, that's not okay though. Like, you can't come out like that. And that's what I'm saying. I think we're at that point now where more people are willing to say like, that's not okay. Like, I can remember things growing up where like you would see it and you knew it was racist, but no one would be held accountable, So I think we have entered some stage of accountability. So yeah, that's what I'm seeing right now.
Okay. And then with that, like I really enjoyed your article. And I wanted to take some time to share that. And how long did it take you? Like, did you write this when you were in school? A graduate school, right? Oh.
So yeah, I wrote this so this was like May last year. So basically a year ago. So we had already been in the pandemic for a couple months, right? As far as like lockdowns go. And honestly, it's so funny. This article came out because of my interactions on LinkedIn. So if you can remember how those threads were, bro, a year ago, it was hot. Like the pandemic, I think everybody was like locked in, and like I just felt like I was spending like hours in these threads. And a lot of it, like there's different pockets on LinkedIn, and
Uh,
I don't even think this guy is still on LinkedIn anymore. I haven't seen him, but Earl
mhm,
Gibson, I don't know what thread he put out some post, and I jumped on there, and
mhm.
me and him, like, it was a really good exchange.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, consciously having to tell myself, like, don't end this conversation. Like, you guys are on two totally opposite ends of the spectrum,
Um,
but you're learning. Like, I was learning from him.
mhm,
And I would like to say he was learning from me. Like, it very much felt like mutual. Like, we don't agree at all, but this is what I'm seeing and this is what you're seeing.
mhm.
So I started to have a lot of those kind of threads on LinkedIn where, like, I would just have a person that I would really be able to unpack, like, our
Yeah.
differences with, which took a lot of restraint, to get through those type of
Mhm.
exchanges without being, like, emotional, right? And
Yeah.
you're like, so that's kind of what I started to see, that some people don't know, like, the history of oppression. Like, they're looking at today and then trying to come up with, like, a response to what they're seeing.
Yeah.
Um, but it's like, without that historical lens, today it's not accurate to what you believe
Yeah.
is the cause, right? So some people didn't know the history, and then some people did know the history but didn't care. And
Mhm,
some people didn't care and they didn't know the history. But then
mhm.
I also started to see the people in these threads that they knew the history of oppression and they wanted to see systemic change. So I was trying to make sense of all of that. Like, how do you, like, help people kind of see where they're at so they know where they can go next, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
that was like the reason I wrote that, is because I was trying to articulate for my own self, who are these
Mhm.
people that I'm engaging with? Because some of them, I feel like they very well know the history of oppression, but they're not trying to see things change. Um,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So that's
Yeah.
kind of why.
And I feel like that was a great point. And then it's like you think about the education part of it, is like that is the part of the disparity, is the knowledge of race in America. And it's like, like the 1619 project is like, how much of that is lost in the shuffle when you think of on a national level. Like, even the pushback from actually teaching history is still prevalent. Whereas, like, there's certain states where they won't even teach, real history. They'll kind of skim over it. And it's like, that's where you have these debates and have these two different Americas enforced. Whereas, like, we're not teaching a real history of America. Um, and that's part of, like, how do you, that's why I like I'm going to share this, like, with people that want to know truth. And I think that's kind of where you were going. And I like your take. Can you kind of explain, like, with this graphic of the truth and subjective experience and then reported fact, can you kind of break that down?
Yeah. So, it's like you said, I think a lot of the conversations I was having, it would kind of point towards, like, well, who's right?
Mm-hmm.
Or who's true and who's false.
Mm-hmm.
So it does always, to me, seem to bring that part up of, like, well, what is the truth? Are we going to listen to the person that experienced it, right? So, like,
Mm-hmm.
their subjective experience, or are we going to take the police report, which is like
Mm-hmm.
the reported fact? So you always have those kind of two opposing, like, yeah, they're both saying they're the truth, but where is it? And so to me, it's somewhere in between, like, it's probably a little bit of both, but depending on the situation and depending on, like, that person in authority, I think one or the other is going to go out as the actual truth. Like, again, if just using a police report, or it could be a DCFS report, those reported facts that worker writes down is probably what's going to be believed in court. And
Mm-hmm.
that's just because of the setting. But, if you go home to that person's family, they're probably going to believe that subjective experience is the truth. So I think that was kind of where that came from, is that I think it's always going to be difficult for any of us to know, like, what's true or what's not. But it's usually a combination of those two, like what the person feels like they saw happened versus what the person says happened. It's hard to tell sometimes, but I think it's one of those things that if you can't get past that, you
Mm-hmm.
probably won't make progress in these type of conversations. So I think this was like a way for me to say like neither one of us knows what's true, so let's just push past that.
Mm,
If you're gonna say you don't want to talk to me because that's not true, it's like, well, then we're not gonna talk that much because like truth is subjective in a lot of ways. You know, like it's hard for either one of us to say what's definitively true.
mm,
So that's kind of where that came from, just like understanding that we're never really going to know the full truth, and
mm,
we can't let that be a reason that we can't make progress together.
mm.
That's kind of where I was coming from with that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And now, do you feel like, because I know, I wish I could remember. There's a book that was like where people are hired, literally hired to sow disinformation, um, like to keep people at odds with each other. Um, and that's part of, to me, it's like a bell curve where it's like you have the 10% who are kind of just, they enjoy the chaos. They enjoy people not agreeing, not getting together, stirring it up. Then you have the people that are actually trying to unite and bring people together. Uh, and then it's like that bell curve that kind of goes as the information flows. Um, Now, how do you kind of? I guess that's kind of where we go to that quadrant of
Yeah.
disseminating the those who kind of sorting through who's who
Yeah.
of, of and that's
And that's,
kind of where go for it.
I think that's the hard part is something I've learned, you know, doing clinical work is humans can deceive, but
Mm,
humans can also be deceived.
mm,
And that is crazy to me because it always creates a situation where like you really don't know like who you're talking
mm,
to. And it's really easy for a human to lie to someone else. And
mm,
it looks genuine, it sounds genuine, but they're lying through their teeth. And so
mm,
you on the other end, like you might not know that they're deceiving you, but they are.
mm,
It's hard, you know, and I find it interesting that that's like built in to being a
mm,
human is like there's this element of truth that is always kind of gonna be a step ahead.
mm,
Um, so yeah, you know, I am aware that there's people that look like you or me, but they're not really for us. You know,
mm.
what's that saying? Like all skin folk are not kinfolk.
Yeah, yeah.
That's real, you know, and I think
Mm,
especially when you do start to learn the history of America and you
mm,
learn about them using that strategy against us, because they already know if they put someone that looks like, you know, a non-melanated person in that circle, it's obvious who the outsider is. But if
mm,
you put someone that looks like me next to me, I have that much more of a challenge to really understand that he's not for me, right? Or she's
mm,
not for me. So I do think it happens, and I do think there are people that like to fan the flame of like dissent, and like you said, they want to kind of just get under your skin just for the sake of getting under your skin.
mm,
So I did start to have that kind of happen where I would have to almost ask like, is this person trolling me, or do they really want
yeah.
to change about this topic, right? And so for some people, I think you get a sense a little earlier in the exchange that like, okay, they're not really trying to like understand knowledge, you know, like they're just
Mm,
trying to prove their point, which I think is something different than like I'm trying to talk to people to understand.
mm,
I want to understand why you live the way you live and think the way you think, and I hope it's vice versa for you. So for the sake of like not wasting time, you know,
mm,
I do think it's good if you can kind of get a sense of where people are coming from, because you're gonna meet the people that want to advocate just like you. Like they
mm,
know their history and they know what needs to change and for in order for progress to be made. So that would be like that quadrant A person where like they're on your team and they you guys are working together and you want to move things forward. But then there's that quadrant B where these are the people that they are unaware of the history.
mm,
But they have a sense of like, this isn't right though. This isn't fair. It's not just. So those are the people to me that are like really important to talk to because, and I've seen a lot of this, you know, magic is, I know a lot of Black folk right now, like will feel like it's not our job to educate other people. And I
mm,
agree with that. But at the same time, it's like, where else are they going to get it from? You know, if someone's willing to learn, why wouldn't you at least point them in the right direction?
mm,
Um, so I feel like that's this quadrant B. I think it's a lot of the people that might not really understand like the historical context of a
Yeah.
lot of our problems, but they see that they want to change things. So to me, those are the people that I've kind of engaged with, that they want to learn, so that they can change their circle, right? They might not be able to change their full family circle, but at least within their small circle, they can have that impact because they're educated on these things now. Um, and those are the people, like I said, I feel like they're the ones to kind of find and help kind of in their journey. But then there's like the quadrant C. These are kind of the people like the trolls out there,
Mm-hmm.
where they already know how this situation is set up as far as the systemic barriers that are in place.
Mm-hmm.
But they'll dance around, the answers, and they might even throw out statistics, to kind of prove otherwise. But it could get really frustrating when you're engaging with these type of people, because again, they already know that this is unjust and it's not fair, but they're not going to come out and say that. And I'm talking about like just logical examples where you can't see around it. But this goes back to that idea of truth that I was sharing, that this is
Mm-hmm.
where it gets difficult, because like they say that right and you say that you're right. It's like, where do you go from there? And to me, that's where that willingness comes up. If they're
Yeah.
showing you that they're not willing to try to change the system, then don't even spend more time with them, because the more time you spend engaging with them is the less time you spend engaging with someone that
Mm-hmm.
actually wants to change things. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying about that tipping point. I feel like we have reached a tipping point where there's enough people that see we need to change things. And if
Mm-hmm.
we work together, we can build our resources together, build our voices together. We can actually start making changes, which is also that last quadrant of people, the ones that are unaware and like they don't even want to learn. They don't,
Yeah.
like you said, history taught. It's like, what is that about? Like, you don't want
Yeah.
history taught? Like, what are you either afraid of, or like, what don't you
Mm-hmm.
want revealed? But I also feel like those people in quadrant D, not necessarily the best use of your time. If they're telling you they don't want to learn, they're also telling you they don't feel like anything needs to change. It's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like, all right,
Well,
well then me and you don't right
yeah.
now
Yeah.
anything to talk about. So that's kind of how those quadrants all work together.
Okay. Yeah, and that kind of reminds me of even with mental health, is like there are people that do not care, don't want anything, know anything about mental health, and it's like you can't force that. You can't be like, no, it's so important, and this is why X, Y, and Z. It's like you have to just kind of take that. It's like, because I know as a facilitator, you come across a few people where their households don't acknowledge mental health whatsoever, and it exacerbates their condition. And it's like, and our challenge is kind of help them find resources outside of the house where they can find people that can acknowledge and validate and seek, where we can give resources where they can find treatment and aid. And I think that's part of it, like with the quadrant D, as far as like systemic oppression, is to just find people that unite, people that understand and can look at the facts, will take the truth, and make adjustments as truth and our facts are presented to them. And that is a great, that's why I like this quadrant, because it fits in so many different areas of life where it's like, we should all make adjustments as facts are presented to us. And even our own lives, like I know with my mental health, it's like I've made so many adjustments as I worked and met with so many different human beings, and I think that's part of it too, where we're always evolving, especially coming out of this pandemic. It's like we're all kind of figuring out who we are and what that looks like moving forward. And I think that is a premium to really kind of key in on people that are positive and about growth and moving forward.
Yeah, man, I'm glad you can see how it applies to a lot of different social issues.
Mm,
Like you said, that acknowledgement and that willingness matters. And
mm,
people say it in a lot of different ways, but as you were speaking, I was hearing that whole like find your tribe. You know what I
mm,
mean? Like, go find your community of people that believe in what you believe in, and you guys go to work. Like, that's the whole
mm,
point. And so I do feel like it can be easy to spend time trying to convince these people that are telling you they don't care. And some of that's where that humility comes in, like being able to like humble yourself and say like, you know what, this has gone far enough and I'm going to walk away right now.
Yeah.
It's so much better for you. You know what I mean? Like you don't carry that negative energy. And again, now you're available to go talk to someone that wants to talk to you and that wants to build with you. But I like what you said too about truth. Like as new facts are presented, uh, you should be open to that. And like when anybody doesn't want to hear new facts, to me, that's just you saying you don't want to change. Like you don't even want to hear what I have to say.
Yeah.
Because I do think, as far as like our experience of truth, I think what's true for you is true for you. And when your mind like locks onto something as truth, you can't really undo it. So I do feel like a lot of those people know that, and that's why like they don't even put themselves in that position to be changed, because like there's just certain things that if I present this to you and I can show you the sources and I can show you like the accuracy behind it, it's really hard for your mind not to accept that. You might not want to accept it in your heart, but I'm talking about intellectually. I think you could hit someone with some facts that are like they're changed. They might not want to acknowledge that change, but that's just how our mind works. Like once it locks on to something that's the truth, it's almost impossible to like unshake that, if that makes sense. So, I do think it's worth presenting to everyone, whatever it is you want to share, whatever it is you want to build. But once they let you know where they're coming from, I think that's the wisdom has to come in. And like, you got to know, like this person is not trying to go down this journey with me. So why am I going to try to drag them along? It's already going to journey. Like I need to save all my resources for the actual work,
Yeah. And that's where I think that personal truth, where it's like I know for me, it's like there was personal truths where I had to realize like, oh shoot, I'm not as healthy as I thought I was to do X amount of work. Like I have to now adapt to the mental health that I'm actually at, rather than what I was in my 20s, or it's like rather than what I could do in my younger years. Like I'm not that person anymore. And I think that's a hard truth to look at yourself in the mirror and be like, I'm not mentally healthy enough to do what I set out to do or what I originally saw myself doing. And that's part of that. Did you find yourself in that place where it's like, where you saw yourself? Have you made any kind of changes as far as where you were last year and where you're like, okay, let me now that I'm kind of out of that collective trauma, like can kind of see more of clarity of what you can accomplish moving forward?
I mean, I think for me, like you said, my individual perspective on the journey so far is really it's the historical lens. I think I've always kind of liked history because I do think it helps. Just really, I like the history of words. So, etymology, I really like studying the origin of words. And what I started to find with like language is it just changed how I hear people talk and how I write, just because like I have a history of where these words came from. So I do feel like with the pandemic and everything it's kind of shown us, I do see the importance of like learning history, but then also sharing it with other people, because history is just knowledge, and it's just like knowledge does make a really big difference. So individually, like I really have, I'm trying to structure like my projects and the things I want to do with my skills, with like reaching out and sharing knowledge with people, like whether it's the trauma information, like a lot of the stuff I love doing with trauma is just psychoeducational material, just talking to people about trauma, like not talking about their trauma, even though there's space for that. I just mean talking about trauma in general. Like the more you understand trauma, the more you will understand your own experience. So this whole pandemic has really just kind of empowered me to feel like I want to use what I love and share it with people, which is like learning. I always tell people, so my mom told me the first day she picked me up from preschool, she said, like, I got in the car and I was like super excited. And she said the first thing I told her was like, Mom, they have rules. And she said I just broke down all the rules. Um, and I just always thought that was interesting that even at a young age, like I've just always liked structure and like information and sharing it with people. So that's kind of how it's hit me. You know, like I said, I'm really close to being licensed. So I know with that, I can do a lot more just from like an independent standpoint. And really, I just want to put myself out there to educate because I think information makes a huge difference. Again, for those that are willing, you know, like I think when you learn certain things, it's kind of like can't help but see it a different way. So I think that's how it's kind of hit me, man. Like, is just seeing that a lot of people, and this is all stuff that I learned from just being on threads on LinkedIn, is some people are just unaware. Like, they just really don't know the history. And I do like that a lot of platforms are doing that now. Like, I think last week I saw Ben and Jerry's. I thought they put out a really good historical, just kind of breakdown of a lot of where these social issues have come from. And that's kind of how I would like to help out as well. It's just like sharing the information I have that's helped me kind of see things differently. And so I've learned it from both sides, you know, people that want to advocate for change and then the people that don't. I have learned from the other side. And I feel like the breakdown is like a lot of people want to talk about the systemic issues, but then it seems like on a more conservative side, they just want to talk about the individual accountability. And I think you need both. If you have systems, it's easier for people to have like a better individual journey, you know, but when the system is broken, how can you hold somebody individually accountable when you know they're doing those things because of poverty or economic disparity? So I don't know, man, it's given me a lot of perspective just to kind of help with like that educational information sharing aspect.
Okay. And that kind of goes to the, I think that's always been the conservative move is to individualize it. And it's I think that's the play, you know, it's like I try to, my goal, you know, it's like the two-party system is what it is. It has its flaws, and we know, you know, it's like, so part of it is always try to take a step back from both. Like I don't know about you, but like I'm a registered non-party member.
Same.
yeah. And it's like and that's where, you know, if you're in a heavily a democratic state, then it's kind of just as, it can be just as stagnated as a red state. So it's like because there's nothing that you know, it's like this party dominates this state, so they don't. It's a lot harder to hold people accountable. Whereas like their seat isn't up for grabs really. And now how do you with what you know about this is always interesting to me because I always felt like the professors when I was in college, I always wish that they had more power in government because they were so like brilliant and they knew a lot of how things could work better for society. Like how does what you know about human behavior inform your viewpoint on government?
It's interesting, man. I almost put political pursuit with like business pursuit, where unfortunately, you know, I think a lot of the motivation now is not necessarily what's best for the constituents or what's best for your customers. It's more of like, how can we get more? How can we get more? Really, I got disheartened with our political system when I started learning about like lobbies or lobbyists, and really, I think it's called ALEC. And that was actually a social work course that we started talking about that. Because originally I thought I wanted to go the legislative advocacy route. Like I really like research. So I really thought I wanted to go into that policy route and do like macro social work. But I mean, like I said, culturally, I just feel like the political space, it's just so corrupt, man. Like I don't doubt that there's some politicians that are actually in it for the right reasons. But at the same time, I know for a fact there are those that like it's not about doing good, you know, for people. It's more about how can we benefit off this system. So like I hate to say that I struggle to have like confidence in our political arena I do like some of the changes, that have happened, and like there's progress being made. But I guess I just feel like, just like with business owners, like whoever the biggest snake is, he's
Mm,
probably going to go the farthest as far as like unethical, immoral behavior. And so it's like, how do you have a standard against someone like that? He's
mm,
willing to cut me when I'm not willing to cut him, and that's how
mm,
he's going to get ahead. Is kind of how
yeah,
I see political things now. And like I said, I want to have faith in them, but I haven't really seen anything yet to show me otherwise, that the person with the most money, or like I said, with the most willingness to do something immoral, is gonna win, basically. So
mm,
it's interesting. I don't want to knock it. I think it's just like any other area in like human activity, where I think we have to at least try to do
yeah,
things ethically and morally, sound. But I do recognize that there's some like pretty evil people that are willing. I want to say it's a proverb where it says like the ruthless man gets riches, and it's like there's a reason that he became rich, because like he'll do it at any cost.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
know that that's true about humans, just as far as like our behavior and our heart.
Mm,
It's hard to kind of feel like that political space is actually for me,
yeah.
and when you could think about something, I think last week, right, about the youth and the juveniles being able to be sentenced to life without any
Yeah,
justification.
Supreme Court. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you see stuff like that, and it's like, come on,
Mm,
man, don't tell me you're
mm,
about the people, because why? How is that all okay for a young
yeah.
person to be locked away forever?
Mm.
So those type of things, where it's like, I don't know what motivated them to vote that way.
And those are and that's the thing where it's like, to me it gets hazy, because like those are, the Supreme Court is the highest court, and and a lot of those people are devout, with their religious practice, but you can make a decision where a child can be sentenced to life. So it's like those things are kind of, to me, contradictions, and it doesn't compute in that way.
So I mean, it makes me think. Judge Judy used to say this a lot. If you ever watch
Mm,
Judge Judy, if it doesn't make sense, it's a lie. And
mm,
she would say that, she's hearing
mm,
a case like, this isn't making sense. One of you guys is lying about this.
mm,
So I think there's a simple truth there. But yeah, I agree with you. Like, there's a contradiction when you could vote on something like that, and
mm,
or support something like that. So to me, whenever there's that kind of discrepancy, or we feel like there's something off, that's
mm,
where I say, like, I don't know what's really motivating them. I don't
mm,
know if there's somebody with deep pockets that told them like, hey man, we'll give you this amount of money if you get
mm,
this legislation in. And it sounds far-fetched, but not really, when you learn about ALEC and other organizations that literally lobby with like
yeah.
super PACs to get things voted in. So it's a
Mm,
struggle, man, for me to feel like those type of things are just like an accident, or they
mm,
just happen to vote that way. It's like, I think there's always like a bigger kind of
mm,
motivator behind the scenes that we don't really get to see. And
yeah.
it's hard. It's kind of hard to tell, what's what.
Well, I think that's part of the trying to get money out of politics, because like you have these, um, pretty much you can buy your own policies. You know how you can influence. Yeah, and it's like, just with where, regardless of how anybody felt about the ride sharing policy, or bill, like they bought that. It was like they they spent X amount of dollars to have that passed, and it's like things like that where it's like, oh, that's money that did that. That's not actual democracy. Where it's like, so that's the part that's disheartening. Now I have been looking, like I listened to this Stoicism podcast, and it's
Okay.
like that part of like, you want to participate in politics because it does affect your life, but you don't want to participate to the point where it leads you to despair. And I think that's very important. Where we can't afford to tune out, but we also can't afford to be underwater so long. I know, like me, I took in too much Black death and struggle last year, and it messed me up, man. Um, and I'm still coming out of it. Um,
Yeah, man. I could tell you Trayvon Martin was the person that it hit me really hard.
Mm.
Um, just, and I don't know if it was because like the 911 tape and
Mm.
Zimmerman like clearly being an aggressor where he's told not to.
Mm.
That was kind of like the last time that I dove deep into all of the media around that incident. So beyond that, man, like, and sometimes I feel bad for this, but I don't watch these videos that come out. There's
Mm.
so much footage now,
Mm.
and that was a conscious decision I made during the pandemic. Like, and I remember, Ahmaud Arbery, really struggling with that one because, like, obviously
Mm.
there was footage of that, but I did not want to watch it, and I have not watched it. George Floyd, like, I have not watched it, and I don't want to watch it. Like,
Mm.
there's just so many, like you said, so much loss of life that
Mm.
to me, even that is not an accident. You
Mm.
know, I don't understand why there's so much melanated loss of life that's put out there for you to watch
Mm.
at your disposal. But I don't see anyone else, their murder clips kind of being put out there like that. So there's
Mm.
just so many layers to what I feel like is always kind of a psychological attack on
Yeah.
melanated individuals. And I do think that's one of them. And I think it's wisdom to like not put that stuff in your
Mm.
presence, you know what I mean? Because like there's an impact on that. And like I said, I would feel bad at times because it's like, no, I haven't watched it. But I
Mm.
don't want to watch it, because I know that those images, they stay with us, bro.
Mm.
Maybe not forever, but like you said, you almost have to like unwork that stuff out of your life. So it's unfortunate, and I do hope we continue to fight, for better circumstances. But there is
Mm.
a lot of things that to me, they're not accidents, if you will.
Mm.
I just feel like a lot of things are done intentionally, and unfortunately, I feel like that's one of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a great point. That's great because I know one thing, like just the last 2 weeks, I've had to take a step back and address my own life, and I think that's part of the psyche of I want to say it's a residual buildup of traumas, like Ahmaud Arbery is the one that got me, right, where it's like that. I don't know why, the combination and him doing everything you're supposed to do in society in working out, being a healthy individual, and how hard it is to make it to that point and still lose your life. It really messed me up. And that's where it's like, I think it's psychological warfare. Um, Especially last year, man, like it was just all over the place as far as everybody was working on everybody's psyche. I know people were tinkering with my psyche, and it was like it was brutal, man. It was a brutal year for if just in general, man. Now, what would you say? And that's the part where, like you said, it's hard to be informed but not let it take its toll on you. Um, and now, would you say is that kind of part of what you were saying as far as finding your tribe and just kind of doing the work? Is that kind of how you are approaching it? Where it's like you're not watching the videos anymore, so you're kind of applying your work. Your work is the video. Your work, that energy, the negative stuff. You don't need to see it to continue to do what you've been doing. That's kind of how I've been approaching it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. Like you said, we know this is still a problem.
Mm.
But do I need to watch someone lose their life?
Mm.
Uh,
Mm.
Probably not.
Mm.
And I think a way I've been saying is formed is reading.
Mm.
Like I still read about all the loss of life, which even that is impactful when you're
Mm.
reading an article. Um, it's just one of those things that I do think it's helpful to know,
Mm.
what's happening, but watching it and listening to it is something else. Like that's a whole different level of
Mm.
experience. But yeah, man, I think for me, it has been, like you said, just doing work. Um, Before the pandemic started, our agency did put together a racial and social justice task force.
Mm.
So they brought me onto that, which was really cool. So then obviously once the pandemic happened, it was even more of a thing that we worked on. And that's something that we're working towards, trying to do more work in that area.
Mhm.
And that's what I've found is like helpful is just like connecting with people. And like you said, I guess just like really trying to do the work. And
Mhm.
LinkedIn has been great as far as
Mhm.
just like networking and being able to meet people that are also doing the work. So I
Mhm.
think it's been a combination of those two, like trying to connect, with people that want to do this type of work and want to spread this type of message, but then
Mhm.
staying informed at a distance. Like I'll read, some articles, but I'm not gonna watch the video of
Yeah.
this teenager being shot, by a police officer, things like that. It's like, nah,
Mhm.
I don't need to experience it on that level to know that there's still
Mhm.
work to be done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's real, man. That's real. Now, with all that, like, how are you finding the optimism and the there's the pain, there's the joy and the pain with Black life always. It's like, so how are you finding that with you and your wife, the love and the enjoyment of life beyond, I see the plants, but do you guys have like milestones or vacations? Like, how do you guys kind of um, give yourself that uh, give yourself the avenue for joy and enjoyment of life?
So about my wife, um,
Mm.
she's Hispanic.
Mm.
Uh, my wife is Mexican, and
Uh,
we met in a drum line actually,
uh,
which is really funny because I didn't, get with her for any other reason than who she is, and she's a drummer. We were both studying psychology. We marched in the same drum line for 2 years. So I married her because of just like we're just such a good fit for each other.
mm.
But my mom, because my dad passed away in 2011,
Mm.
um, and I'm thankful I had him for the years I did, because he was able to raise me into a man.
Mm.
But yeah, he ended up passing away, and so he had met my wife Veronica, and he had already given me like approval, like yo, she's cool, like yes.
Uh,
Like I remember the day he said it. We're in the kitchen, and he was just like, she's cool, like if she's the one, then like she's cool. So
mm.
I love that he got to meet her and like basically said like she's worthy, son. And
Mm.
my mom though was the one that was very very just like, are you sure you want to marry someone that's not black? And I appreciate my mom for that because I think she just wanted to be sure that I'm sure
Mm.
you
Mm.
know what you guys are committing to. So it's been she she's Hispanic, but I mean we always kind of look at it the same way. Like black and brown people have gone through basically very
Mm.
similar experiences here in America. And she knows what it's like, to be stereotyped and profiled
Mm.
and things like that. So, we talk about these things all the time. And like I said, she also is a social worker. So we've been able to kind of, I guess, like look at things from like a social worker's perspective. Like we
Okay.
talk about social issues every night and we talk about human behavior every day. So it's just like one of those things that we kind of see it as that. Like we're
Mm.
able to have these kind of conversations about it and really talk about like the issues at hand and what can we do about it. And beyond that, that's kind of where the music work comes in for us. That's kind of
Mm.
the space for us that is always kind of going to be grounding and just like comfortable and creative and
Mm.
fun. It's
Mm.
collaborative. We've been teaching one of the same groups together for like the last 7 years. So that's kind of how we balance ourselves, man, is like being a black and brown couple and going into certain spaces sometimes, like white spaces, and both feeling like, let's not go back here because like just didn't feel like we are welcome. And like
Mm.
being able to be with a partner that can understand that to some degree, has been helpful because we bounce off of each other in that regard. But I would say music is kind of how we find that joy. And of course, don't get me wrong, like our faith, we both are believers, both read the Bible, both pray, and
Mm.
thank the Lord, for our faith. And that's been a huge one as well, a mix between faith, music, and just being social workers and kind of
Yeah.
having a different perspective. on life, I think.
That's beautiful, man.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, I want to say thank you so much for being for joining me with this podcast, man. It's been very enlightening and informative. Like I like even reading your article, man. It's like you can tell your heart and soul is in this, man. So I appreciate you for sharing with me today. And it's nice to actually talk to you because I feel like, yeah, man, because I for my own self, for my own little mental health stuff, it's like it's helpful for me to talk to people. And it's like, and that distortion of virtual world and actual human being, like breaking through that virtual, um, what is it, the virtual avatar? Like, cool, I get to talk to you as a person. So it's nice, man. It's nice. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. Like you said, I know we've been exchanging for a while, so it is cool to connect in a different way. So thanks for having me on, man. It was fun. I thought we had a great conversation.
Yeah, awesome, man. And where can people find you, Mr. Jonathan Wicks?
Man, I hate to say it, but really LinkedIn is the only way. I've struggled with social media for a long time, so I've distanced myself. Yeah. So like I don't have an IG. I don't do Twitter, and I don't do Facebook anymore. So LinkedIn, Jonathan M. Wicks, if you want to find me. And again, I think LinkedIn has been great, bro. Like even though it's one social platform that I still engage with, it's cool. Like you really do meet some really cool individuals. Like you're a perfect example. So I've met a lot of really cool people through LinkedIn and been able to actually start working on some real projects, from LinkedIn connections and things like that. So yeah, man, LinkedIn, if you want to connect, I'm always willing, and I love engaging with new people.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Man, you almost got me into another topic. I was gonna say let's talk about social media.
Hey, I would love to do another episode and we could get into that, bro.
Okay. Sounds good, man. Thank you. Well, thank you for joining us and definitely have you back on, man. This is dope.
All right, Magic. Thanks for having me and enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Thank you. All right, everybody. So this has been Fight the Funk podcast. I've been your host, Magic Collins, and that was my guest, Jonathan Wicks, clinician, music educator, and founder. You can catch him on LinkedIn, have a conversation with him. Good dude, as you can tell, and he's a plant man in the tree. Love the trees, Mr. Jonathan. Love the trees. All right, y'all have a good one. Enjoy yourself. Magic with 2 A's. Deuce.